Thank you so much for spending your time with me every day. Your support means the world. If you enjoyed this story, please keep watching. Tap the like button, hit subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback and encouragement help this channel grow and bring you even more gripping tales. Stay tuned, and see you in the next video. Jasmine Taylor stared at her phone in horror as the message lit up the screen. "I found your letter, the one you wrote to David." Her fingers trembled as she read the text from a number she didn't recognize. A cold wave washed over her, making her knees weak. That letter was never supposed to be sent. It contained her deepest feelings, the raw emotions she had kept locked away for years. The letter held secrets she wasn't ready to share with anyone, especially not David, her childhood friend who had moved away years ago. And now somehow, impossibly, someone had it. Someone had read her most private thoughts. Someone knew. The phone buzzed again. Another message. "I'd like to meet you. Tomorrow. 7 p.m. at Riverside Cafe." Jasmine's stomach dropped. Who was this person? How did they get her letter? She had written that letter 3 weeks ago during a night of nostalgia and loneliness, pouring her heart out about her unrequited love for David, about the life they could have had if things had been different. She had addressed the envelope in a moment of courage but never intended to mail it. The letter was supposed to be hidden in her drawer, tucked away like the feelings it described. But somehow it had escaped. Somehow it had found its way into a stranger's hands. 3 weeks earlier, on a rainy Friday night, Jasmine Taylor sat at her small kitchen table in her modest apartment on the east side of town. Rain tapped gently against the window as she sipped her tea, her mind wandering to places and people from her past. The apartment was quiet except for the occasional rumble of thunder and the soft purring of her cat, Milo, who was curled up on the chair beside her. At 32, Jasmine's life hadn't turned out exactly as she had planned. She loved her job as a kindergarten teacher, finding joy in the curious minds and innocent hearts of her students. But her personal life felt incomplete, a puzzle missing crucial pieces. She had dated occasionally, but nothing ever seemed to click, and lately her thoughts had been drifting back to David more and more. David Williams had been her best friend throughout high school. They had grown up in the same neighborhood, studied together, laughed together, dreamed together. Jasmine had fallen in love with him somewhere along the way, but she never told him. She was too afraid of ruining their friendship, of making things awkward. And then, right after graduation, David's family moved across the country for his father's job. They stayed in touch for a while, but life happened, and eventually they lost contact. A particularly loud clap of thunder made Jasmine jump, spilling a few drops of tea onto the table. As she wiped it up, her eyes fell on the small wooden box tucked in the corner of her kitchen counter. It was her letter box, where she kept stationery and stamps. A sudden urge came over her to write to David, to finally tell him how she felt all those years ago. Not to send it, of course, but just to get the words out of her heart and onto paper. She pulled out a sheet of her nicest stationery, a soft cream color with a subtle floral pattern at the edges, and began to write. "Dear David, it's been so long since we last spoke, and I don't even know if you'll remember me. This is Jasmine Taylor from Oakwood High, your friend, your study partner. The girl who was too afraid to tell you that she was in love with you. That's right. I loved you then, David. Not just as a friend, but completely, with all my heart. I loved your laugh, your kind eyes, the way you always stood up for what was right. I loved how you could explain complex math problems so patiently. I loved how you knew exactly what to say when I was having a bad day. I never told you. I kept it locked inside because I was scared of losing your friendship. And then you moved away, and I lost you anyway. I've thought about you so many times over the years, wondering what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to speak up. I don't know why I'm writing this now. Maybe it's the rain, making me nostalgic. Maybe it's because I turned 32 last month and realized that I've never felt about anyone else the way I felt about you. I hope life has been good to you, David. I hope you found someone who makes you happy, who isn't afraid to tell you how special you are. I hope you're still drawing those amazing sketches, still believing in justice and kindness like you always did. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, know that there's someone out here who still thinks of you and smiles. With love that never quite faded, Jasmine. Tears blurred her vision as she folded the letter and slipped it into an envelope. On the front, she wrote the last address she had for David, an address from over a decade ago. She even put a stamp in the corner, completing the illusion that she might actually send it. It felt therapeutic, somehow, to pretend that her words might reach him. Jasmine placed the letter in her purse, planning to put it away in her keepsake box in the bedroom later. Then, exhausted from the emotional release, she fell asleep on the couch with Milo purring beside her. The next morning was hectic. Jasmine had promised to help her sister Tanya move into her new apartment, and she was running late. She rushed around, getting dressed and gathering supplies. In her hurry, she didn't notice when the envelope slipped out of her purse and onto the floor near the front door. Mrs. Henderson, her elderly neighbor who often collected Jasmine's mail when she was away, stopped by to return a casserole dish. Seeing the stamped envelope on the floor, she assumed Jasmine had dropped it on her way out and meant to mail it. Being a helpful neighbor, Mrs. Henderson picked it up and added it to the letters she was taking to the post office that day. And so, Jasmine's most private feelings began their journey to an address where David Williams no longer lived. Alexander Reed stood in his vast penthouse, looking out at the city lights sparkling below. At 40, he was one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs in the country, the founder and CEO of Reed Innovations. His company had revolutionized renewable energy technology, making him a billionaire before he turned 35. From the outside, Alexander had everything: wealth, success, respect in his field. His name appeared regularly on lists of the most influential people in business and technology. But standing there in his immaculate penthouse with its minimalist furniture and expensive art, he felt the familiar emptiness creeping in. His phone buzzed with messages from his assistant about tomorrow's meetings, from business partners seeking his input, from charities requesting his presence at upcoming galas. Alexander sighed and put the phone away without responding. Sometimes he wondered if anyone would contact him if he wasn't Alexander Reed, billionaire. If they would care about his thoughts, if those thoughts couldn't make them money. A knock at the door interrupted his brooding. It was Miguel, the building's concierge, with the day's mail. "Evening, Mr. Reed. Just a few things for you today," Miguel said with a warm smile, handing over a small stack of envelopes. "Thanks, Miguel. How's your son doing with those college applications?" Alexander asked, genuinely interested. Over the years, Miguel was one of the few people Alexander felt saw him as a person rather than a walking bank account. "Making progress, sir. Thanks for asking. And thanks again for that recommendation letter. It meant the world to him." After chatting briefly, Alexander closed the door and sifted through the mail. Bills, an invitation to a tech conference, a letter from his alma mater seeking donations, the usual. But at the bottom of the pile was something different. A cream-colored envelope with handwritten address. The envelope was addressed to David Williams, but at Alexander's address. Alexander had purchased the penthouse 5 years ago from a corporate relocation company. He had no idea who had lived there before that. Curious, he opened the letter. Normally he would have marked it returned to sender or addressee unknown, but something about the handwriting, soft and flowing, made him pause. He unfolded the paper and began to read. Alexander read the letter twice, then a third time. The raw honesty of it struck him deeply. When was the last time anyone had been that genuine with him? His recent relationships had been brief and superficial, often with people more interested in his wealth or status than in him as a person. He sat down at his desk and stared at the letter for a long time, thinking about the woman who had written it, Jasmine Taylor. Even her name sounded warm. He wondered what she looked like, what her laugh sounded like, what made her eyes light up. Before he could talk himself out of it, Alexander did something impulsive. He took out his phone and searched for Jasmine Taylor online, adding kindergarten teacher, based on a hunch from the gentle tone of her letter. Several results came up, but one caught his eye, a Jasmine Taylor who taught at Sunshine Elementary School in his city. The school website had a photo of her with her class, all of them beaming at the camera. Jasmine had a beautiful smile that reached all the way to her eyes, and she was kneeling down to be at the same level as her students. Alexander's heart beat faster. He found the school's contact information and, after a moment's hesitation, sent a text message to the number listed for parent communications. "I found your letter, the one you wrote to David." A minute passed. 2. Then his phone buzzed with a reply. "Who is this?" Alexander hesitated. Would she think he was strange for reaching out? Maybe this was a mistake. "My name is Alexander Reed. Your letter was delivered to my address. I'm not David." There was a long pause before the next message came through. "I think there's been a mistake. I didn't send any letter." Alexander looked down at the cream-colored paper in his hand. "It's addressed to David Williams, from Jasmine Taylor. It's about feelings you had in high school. I'm sorry for the confusion, but it was delivered to my address." Another long pause. "Oh my God. I never meant to send that. I'm so embarrassed." Alexander typed quickly. "Please don't be. It was beautiful. Honest. I'd still like to meet, if you're comfortable. No pressure, just coffee." The minutes ticked by with no response. Alexander was about to give up when his phone buzzed once more. "Okay, tomorrow at 7, but just to get my letter back." Alexander smiled, folding the letter carefully and placing it in his desk drawer. For the first time in months, he felt a spark of something new. Jasmine could barely focus on her class the next day. How had that letter gotten out? She vaguely remembered writing it during that rainy night, but she was certain she hadn't mailed it. Had she? The whole situation was mortifying. And now she was meeting a stranger, Alexander Reed, who had read her most private thoughts. She searched his name online during her lunch break and nearly choked on her sandwich. Alexander Reed wasn't just any stranger. He was Alexander Reed, the tech billionaire whose face occasionally appeared in the news. His company was working on making clean energy more accessible worldwide. And he had her embarrassing love letter. By the time she arrived at Riverside Cafe that evening, Jasmine's nerves were frayed. She had changed outfits 4 times before settling on a simple blue dress that her sister always said brought out her eyes. She didn't know why she cared how she looked. She was just picking up her letter and leaving, after all. She spotted him immediately. Alexander Reed was sitting at a corner table dressed in a casual button-down shirt rather than the suits he wore in press photos. He was more handsome in person, with warm brown eyes and subtle streaks of gray at his temples. When he saw her, he stood up, a gentle smile crossing his face. "Jasmine?" he asked, his voice deeper than she had imagined. "Mr. Reed," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Please, call me Alexander." He gestured to the chair across from him. "I took the liberty of ordering a pot of tea. The menu said it was their special blend. I hope that's okay." Jasmine sat down stiffly. "I just came for my letter." Alexander nodded, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out the cream-colored envelope. He placed it on the table between them. "Thank you," Jasmine said, quickly taking the letter and tucking it into her purse. "Don't be," Alexander said, his eyes kind. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. You're glad you received a stranger's misdirected love letter? Alexander laughed, a rich, genuine sound. When you put it that way, it does sound strange. But yes, I am. It was refreshing to read something so honest. Most of the communication I receive is carefully calculated. Despite her embarrassment, Jasmine was intrigued. I can imagine. It must be difficult, never knowing if people are being genuine or just responding to your position. Exactly, Alexander said, looking surprised and pleased at her understanding. That's exactly it. The waitress arrived with their tea, and as she poured, Jasmine found herself relaxing slightly. There was something about Alexander's manner that put her at ease. He wasn't at all what she had expected. So, he said after the waitress left, you're a kindergarten teacher? Jasmine nodded. For 8 years now. You must be very patient. It helps to love what you do, she replied with a small smile. They're at such an amazing age, everything is new and exciting to them. As they talked, Jasmine gradually forgot her embarrassment. Alexander asked thoughtful questions about her work, genuinely interested in her stories about her students. In turn, she found herself asking about his company's projects, especially their community initiatives to bring renewable energy to underserved areas. That's what I'm most proud of, Alexander confessed. The business success is nice, but knowing we're making a difference, helping communities become self-sufficient, that means more. 2 hours passed, in what felt like minutes. They shared stories from their childhoods. Alexander growing up with working-class parents who sacrificed to send him to good schools, Jasmine raised by her grandmother after her parents died in an accident when she was young. She taught me everything important, Jasmine said, smiling at the memory of her grandmother. How to be strong but kind, how to find joy in small things. She sounds wonderful, Alexander said softly. She was. As the cafe began to close, they reluctantly stood to leave. Outside, a light rain had started falling. May I drive you home? Alexander asked. That's not necessary, Jasmine began, but a crack of thunder changed her mind. Actually, if you don't mind, that would be nice. In his car, which was expensive but not flashy, Jasmine noted they fell into comfortable silence. When they reached her apartment building, Alexander turned to her. Jasmine, I've really enjoyed talking with you tonight. Jasmine hesitated. Alexander was charming, intelligent, and seemed genuinely kind. I don't know, Alexander. We're very different people. True, he acknowledged. But isn't that what makes conversation interesting? Jasmine couldn't help but smile. I suppose it does. How about Sunday? There's a community garden downtown that's having its spring festival. We could check it out, maybe grab lunch after? The invitation was casual, public, and appealing. Okay, she found herself saying. Sunday sounds nice. Alexander's smile lit up his face. Great. I'll text you the details. As Jasmine walked to her apartment, letter safely in her purse, she felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. What was she doing, agreeing to see Alexander read again? And why couldn't she stop smiling at the thought? Over the next few weeks, Jasmine and Alexander began seeing each other regularly. Their second date at the garden festival had been followed by a visit to a local art museum, then dinner at a small family-owned restaurant that Alexander loved. Each time they met, Jasmine discovered something new about him that surprised her. Despite his wealth, yes, he had the penthouse and nice things, but he wasn't flashy or extravagant. He was generous, not in a showy way, but in small, thoughtful gestures. He remembered details about her life and asked follow-up questions weeks later, showing he truly listened when she spoke. For Alexander, being with Jasmine was like breathing fresh air after being indoors too long. She treated him like a person, not a walking bank account or a business opportunity. She challenged his opinions, made him laugh, and showed him parts of the city he'd never explored despite living there for years. One Saturday, about a month after they'd met, Alexander took Jasmine to a community center where his company was installing solar panels as part of a pilot program to provide affordable clean energy. The center serves about 200 families, he explained as they watched the installation team work. With these panels, they'll save thousands on energy costs each year, money they can put back into their programs. Jasmine watched him as he spoke, noting how animated he became when discussing the project. "You really care about this," she observed. Alexander nodded. "When I started Reed Innovations, the goal was never just to make money. It was to make clean energy accessible to everyone, not just those who could afford the initial investment." After the community center, they went for a walk in a nearby park. The spring day was perfect, warm sunshine, blooming flowers, children playing on the grass. "Can I ask you something personal?" Alexander said as they sat on a bench watching ducks swim in the pond. "Sure," Jasmine replied, turning to face him. "That letter you wrote to David, do you still feel that way about him? Do you still love him?" Jasmine was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "No," she finally said. "I think what I felt for David was real at the time, but it's been over a decade. The person I wrote about in that letter doesn't really exist anymore, not in my life anyway. He's a memory, a might have been." Alexander nodded slowly. "I'm glad you wrote it, though. That letter brought you into my life." Their eyes met, and Jasmine felt a flutter in her chest. Slowly, Alexander leaned closer, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted to, but she didn't want to. Their lips met in a gentle kiss that made Jasmine's heart race. When they broke apart, both were smiling. Alexander took her hand, interlacing their fingers as they continued their walk. As spring turned to summer, Jasmine and Alexander grew closer. They fell into a comfortable rhythm, spending weekends together and meeting for dinner during the week when their schedules allowed. Jasmine introduced Alexander to her sister Tanya, who was initially starstruck but quickly came to see him as just Alex, the man who made her sister happier than she'd been in years. Alexander, in turn, introduced Jasmine to his small circle of true friends, people who had known him before his success or who, like him, valued privacy and genuine connections over networking opportunities. Not everything was smooth sailing. There were awkward moments when Alexander's wealth created an unintentional barrier, like when he casually suggested flying to Paris for the weekend, not realizing that Jasmine would need to request time off weeks in advance. Or when Jasmine felt out of place at a formal charity gala, surrounded by people who lived in a world of privilege she had never experienced. But they learned from these moments, finding middle ground and building understanding. Alexander came to appreciate the simple pleasures that filled Jasmine's life. Game nights with her sister, helping her students plant a classroom garden, baking cookies from her grandmother's recipes. And Jasmine grew more comfortable navigating the occasional high-profile events that were part of Alexander's life, finding that beneath the designer clothes and practiced smiles, people were just people. One warm July evening, they were having dinner on the balcony of Alexander's penthouse when he suddenly grew quiet. "What's on your mind?" Jasmine asked, reaching across the table to touch his hand. Alexander looked up, his expression serious. "I need to tell you something, and I'm not sure how you'll take it." Jasmine felt a surge of anxiety. "You can tell me anything." He took a deep breath. "I've been offered a position overseeing a major renewable energy initiative in Africa. It would mean relocating to Kenya for at least a year, possibly longer." "Oh," Jasmine said softly, her heart sinking. "When would you leave?" "September. 2 months from now." Alexander squeezed her hand. "It's an incredible opportunity. The project could bring clean, affordable energy to communities that have never had reliable electricity before." "That sounds amazing," Jasmine said. genuinely impressed despite her sadness. "You have to take it." "But what about us?" Alexander asked, his eyes searching hers. Jasmine tried to smile. "We'll figure it out. Maybe I can visit during school breaks." "Or," Alexander said, his voice hesitant, "you could come with me." Jasmine's eyes widened. "Come with you? Alexander, my life is here." "I know it's a lot to ask," he said quickly, "and I would never want you to resent me for taking you away from the things you love. But Jasmine, I love you. These past months have been the happiest of my life." It was the first time either of them had said, "I love you," and despite the complicated circumstances, Jasmine's heart soared hearing the words. "I love you too," she whispered, "but I don't know if I can just leave everything behind." Alexander nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I don't need an answer now. Just promise me you'll think about it." "I promise," Jasmine said, leaning across the table to kiss him. That night, lying awake in her apartment, Jasmine's mind raced. Could she really move across the world with Alexander? What would that mean for her career, her relationships here? But at the same time, the thought of being separated from him for a year or more was painful. Over the next few weeks, Jasmine wrestled with her decision. She researched teaching opportunities in Kenya, spoke with her principal about the possibility of a leave of absence, and had long conversations with her sister about what such a move would mean. "I think you should go," Tanya told her during one such conversation. "You've always played it safe, Jas. Maybe it's time to take a risk." As August drew to a close, Jasmine still hadn't given Alexander her answer. The uncertainty was wearing on both of them, creating a tension that hadn't existed before. Then, a week before Alexander was scheduled to leave, Jasmine received a call from Sunshine Elementary's principal. "Jasmine, I have some news," Principal Davis said. "I've been speaking with the education coordinator for Reed Innovation's African Initiative. They're looking for experienced teachers to help develop early childhood education programs in the communities where they're installing the energy systems." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. "What?" "It would be a one-year position, with the option to extend. You'd be working with local teachers, helping implement modern educational practices while respecting cultural traditions." Principal Davis paused. "It's a remarkable opportunity, Jasmine. And they specifically asked about your availability." That evening, Jasmine confronted Alexander. "Did you arrange this job offer?" Alexander looked genuinely confused. "What job offer?" Jasmine explained about the call from her principal. As understanding dawned on Alexander's face, he shook his head. "Jasmine, I swear I had nothing to do with this." "Yes. There's an educational component to the initiative. We're building schools alongside the energy installations. But I deliberately didn't get involved in the staffing decisions for exactly this reason. I didn't want you to ever think I was trying to manipulate you or your career." Studying his face, Jasmine could see he was telling the truth. "So this is just coincidence?" Alexander smiled. "Or fate. Like a misdirected letter finding its way to exactly the right person." 2 days later, Jasmine accepted the position with the Reed Innovations Education Initiative. It wasn't just about being with Alexander, though that was certainly part of it. The opportunity to make a difference, to expand her own horizons while helping others do the same. It was too perfect to pass up. The next month was a whirlwind of preparations. Jasmine had to pack up her apartment, say goodbye to her students and colleagues, and spend as much time as possible with Tanya before leaving. Alexander was busy with final arrangements for the project, but he made sure to be there for the moments that mattered, helping Jasmine navigate the visa process, accompanying her to farewell dinners with friends, holding her when the magnitude of the change ahead occasionally overwhelmed her. 3 days before their scheduled departure, Alexander invited Jasmine to dinner at the Riverside Cafe, where they had first met properly. For nostalgia's sake, he said with a smile. "One last visit before our adventure begins?" The cafe looked just as it had that first night, warm lighting, the aroma of fresh coffee and baked goods, soft music playing in the background. They were seated at the same corner table, and Alexander ordered the special blend tea, just as he had before. "It's hard to believe it's only been 5 months," Jasmine said, looking around the familiar space. "It feels like I've known you much longer." "In the best way?" Alexander added, reaching across the table to take her hand. They reminisced about their first meeting, how nervous Jasmine had been, how intrigued Alexander had been by her letter. They talked about their favorite moments together and their hopes for the year ahead. As they finished their dessert, chocolate cake that they shared, just as they had on their third date, "Jasmine, there's something I've been wanting to ask you." She tilted her head, curious about his change in tone. Alexander took a deep breath, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Jasmine's eyes widened as he moved from his chair to kneel beside her. "Jasmine Taylor, meeting you has been the greatest gift of my life. You've shown me what it means to be truly seen and loved for who I am, not what I have or what I've achieved. You've brought laughter, warmth, and honesty into my world." He opened the box, revealing a ring with a single, perfect diamond surrounded by smaller stones. "I know we're already embarking on one big adventure together, but I'm hoping you'll consider an even bigger one. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Jasmine's eyes as she looked from the ring to Alexander's hopeful face. This moment, this perfect, surprising moment, was the last thing she had expected when she wrote that letter to David all those months ago. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Alexander, I will marry you." His face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, catching the light and sending rainbows dancing across the table. As he rose to kiss her, the other patrons in the cafe, who had fallen silent during his proposal, burst into applause. Later that night, as they walked hand in hand back to Alexander's penthouse, soon to be rented out during their time in Kenya, Jasmine remembered something. "I still have it, you know." "Have what?" Alexander asked. "The letter. The one that started everything." Alexander smiled. "Maybe we should frame it. Hang it in whatever home we make together." Jasmine laughed, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Maybe we should. A reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected mistakes." 1 year later, Jasmine stood on the porch of their rented house in Nairobi, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The past 12 months had been transformative in ways she never could have imagined. The work was challenging but deeply rewarding. Jasmine had helped establish early childhood programs in 3 different communities, training local teachers and adapting curricula to fit cultural contexts while introducing modern educational methods. She had learned Swahili, made dear friends among her Kenyan colleagues, and fallen in love with the country's vibrant spirit and stunning landscapes. Alexander's renewable energy project was exceeding expectations, bringing reliable electricity to communities that had never had it before. Solar-powered schools, clinics, and community centers were changing lives, creating opportunities that hadn't existed before. And through it all, their relationship had deepened and strengthened. They had faced challenges together, cultural adjustments, work stresses, the occasional bout of homesickness, and had emerged closer for having weathered them as a team. They had married 6 months into their stay, in a small ceremony that blended American and Kenyan traditions. Tanya had flown in to be Jasmine's maid of honor, and several of Alexander's close friends had made the journey as well. But many of their guests were new friends they had made in Kenya, colleagues, neighbors, and community members who had welcomed them so warmly. Jasmine heard the front door open behind her and turned to see Alexander, looking tired but happy after a long day in the field. Beautiful sunset, he said, coming to stand beside her. She agreed, leaning into his embrace. I got a call from headquarters today, Alexander said after a moment. They want to expand the project. 3 more years, more communities, broader scope. Jasmine looked up at him. And what did you tell them? That I needed to talk to my wife first. He smiled down at her. The education coordinator is also hoping you'll stay on, maybe take a leadership role in developing the program further. Jasmine thought about her life back in the States. Her small apartment, her classroom at Sunshine Elementary, her quiet routines. It had been a good life, comfortable and predictable. But this life with Alexander, filled with purpose and adventure and love, was beyond anything she could have imagined. I think, she said slowly, that we've found where we're meant to be, at least for now. Alexander's smile widened. I was hoping you'd say that. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, they stood together in comfortable silence, thinking about the journey that had brought them here, from a misdirected letter to a love that had changed both their lives in ways neither could have predicted. In her pocket, Jasmine carried a small, worn envelope, that cream-colored letter that had started everything. She kept it with her always, a reminder that sometimes the biggest mistakes can lead to the greatest joys. And as stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Jasmine felt a sense of perfect contentment. Her letter had never reached David, the man she thought she loved. Instead, it had found Alexander, the man she was meant to love. Sometimes, she reflected, the heart knows its own path better than we do, even when it seems to be heading in the wrong direction. 3 years later, Jasmine and Alexander stood hand in hand on the grounds of the Hope Center, the newest and largest community development project of the READ initiative. What had begun as a simple renewable energy installation had grown into a comprehensive program that included education, healthcare, and microfinance opportunities for local entrepreneurs. The center was celebrating its grand opening today, and people had come from miles around for the festivities. Children played on the newly installed playground equipment while their parents toured the facilities, classrooms equipped with computers powered by solar panels, a medical clinic with modern equipment, a community garden already lush with vegetables and herbs. Mrs. Reed! Mrs. Reed! A group of young children ran up to Jasmine, eager to show her the artwork they had created for the opening ceremony. This is beautiful, Jasmine exclaimed, kneeling down to admire their colorful drawings. You are all such talented artists. As the children beamed with pride, Jasmine felt a small tug on her skirt. She looked down to see 3-year-old Maya, her and Alexander's daughter, wanting to join the older children. Up, Mama, Maya demanded, holding out her arms. Jasmine laughed and lifted her daughter, settling her on her hip. Maya was their miracle, born under the African sky that had become their home. With her warm brown skin, curly hair, and her father's thoughtful eyes, she was the perfect blend of both her parents. And her name, Maya, meant love in a local dialect, chosen to honor the country that had given them so much. Alexander joined them, wrapping one arm around Jasmine's waist and using his free hand to smooth Maya's unruly curls. The Minister of Education just arrived, he murmured. We should probably head over for the ribbon cutting. As they walked toward the main building, Jasmine marveled at how far they had come. What had begun as a 1-year assignment had evolved into a life's mission. Alexander had restructured READ Innovations, moving its headquarters to Nairobi and shifting its focus primarily to sustainable development projects across Africa. Jasmine now directed all the educational initiatives for the READ Foundation, implementing programs that combined the best of modern teaching methods with traditional knowledge and cultural values. They maintained a home in the States as well, spending a few months there each year to visit family and friends. Tanya had visited them in Kenya several times and was now considering joining them permanently, having fallen in love with both the country and a Kenyan doctor she had met during her last visit. As they approached the gathered crowd, Jasmine saw so many familiar faces, colleagues who had become friends, children who had blossomed under the educational programs she had helped establish. All of them were here to celebrate this milestone, this dream made real through passion and perseverance. The Minister of Education, a dignified woman in her 60s who had become one of Jasmine's mentors, smiled warmly as they approached. "Ah, the Reed family," she said, bending slightly to address Maya. "And how is our little ambassador today?" Maya, suddenly shy, buried her face in Jasmine's shoulder. "She's excited," Alexander answered with a laugh. "We all are." As the ceremony began, Jasmine stood proudly beside her husband, their daughter between them. When it was Alexander's turn to speak, he handed Maya to Jasmine and stepped up to the microphone. "6 years ago," he began, his voice carrying across the attentive crowd, "I received a letter by mistake. A love letter meant for someone else." He paused, his eyes finding Jasmine's in the crowd. "That mistake changed my life in ways I could never have imagined. It led me to my wife, to Kenya, to all of you, and to this moment." Jasmine felt tears spring to her eyes as Alexander continued, speaking about the vision they shared for communities empowered through education and sustainable resources. He spoke not as a wealthy outsider bringing solutions, but as someone who had become part of the community, who had learned as much as he had taught. After the ceremony, as people mingled and enjoyed the refreshments, a young woman approached Jasmine. "Mrs. Reed," she said hesitantly, "I wanted to thank you. 3 years ago, I was in your first teacher training program. Now I run the early childhood center in my village. You changed my life." Jasmine embraced the woman, remembering her as a quiet but determined student. "You did the hard work, Nala. I just showed you some tools." Later that evening, back at their home, with Maya finally asleep after the excitement of the day, Jasmine and Alexander sat on their porch, watching another spectacular African sunset. "I got an email today," Alexander said, taking her hand. "From David Williams." Jasmine looked up, surprised. "David? My David?" Alexander nodded. "I reached out to him a few weeks ago. I thought, well, he played such an important role in our story, even though he never knew it. I wanted to thank him." "What did he say?" Jasmine asked, curious but not anxious. David was a cherished memory, but Alexander was her present, her future, her everything. "He's doing well. Married, 2 kids, working as an architect in Seattle." Alexander paused. "He remembers you fondly. Said you were one of the kindest people he knew in high school. He's happy to hear you're doing so well." Jasmine smiled, feeling a sense of closure. "That's nice. I invited him to visit us sometime, if he's ever in this part of the world. I hope that's okay." "More than okay," Jasmine said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "It would be nice to see him again, to introduce him to my family." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the colors change in the sky. "Do you ever think about how different our lives might have been?" Alexander asked. "If your letter had never been mailed, if it had actually reached David, if I hadn't been impulsive enough to text you?" Jasmine considered his questions. "Sometimes, but I think maybe certain things are meant to be, even if they take an unexpected path to get there." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the worn cream-colored envelope that had traveled with her across continents. The edges were frayed now, the paper soft from years of handling. But the handwriting was still clear. David Williams, written in her flowing script, with an address that had accidentally led her home. "I'm glad my heart got misdirected," she said softly, tucking the letter back into her pocket. It found exactly where it belonged. Alexander pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I love you, Jasmine Reed." "And I love you, Alexander Reed." As night fell over their home, bringing with it a blanket of stars, Jasmine thought about the journey that had brought them here. A lonely night, a letter never meant to be sent, a billionaire with an empty penthouse. All these separate threads somehow weaving together to create the tapestry of their lives. She thought of her grandmother, who had always told her that love finds its way, even down the most unexpected paths. How right she had been. And as Alexander took her hand to lead her inside, Jasmine knew with absolute certainty that sometimes the wrong address could lead to exactly the right destination. Thank you so much for spending your time with me every day. Your support means the world. If you enjoyed this story, please keep watching. Tap the like button, hit subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback and encouragement help this channel grow and bring you even more gripping tales. Stay tuned.